Now we're going to get into some, frankly, gritty details regarding Old Testament laws. There's a lot of details here, but it's going to help us understand better what is happening in Ruth 4 later on as you scroll down the page. So stick with me here through it and pay attention. We're going to start in Leviticus chapter 25, verses 25 through 28, and then we'll look at verses 47 through 55. You can follow along with me here. If one of your fellow Israelites becomes poor and sells some of their property, their nearest relative is to come and redeem what they have sold. If, however, there is no one to redeem it for them, but later on they prosper and acquire sufficient means to redeem it themselves, they are to determine the value for the years since they sold it and refund the balance to the one to whom they sold it. Then they can go back to their own property. What this is saying here is, if you're poor and you have to sell your land, sell your family land in order to have enough money to make it, one of your relatives who has some money should go and buy that land back to you. They pay your debt, in a sense, and then they give the land back to you. They redeem it, they buy it back. Or later, you yourself could buy it back. But if they do not acquire the means to repay, what was sold will remain in the possession of the buyer until the year of Jubilee. It will be returned in the Jubilee, and they can then go back to their property. So another note, every 50 years in Israel was a year of Jubilee, and this was when all land that had been sold, it went back to the original owners. So say you were poor, you sold the land, you didn't have a redeemer, and in Ruth later, this is going to be the term guardian redeemer. Sometimes if you read a different translation, it'll be kinsman redeemer. But say you didn't have one of those, there was no one available who could do that. Well, say it was 5 years until the year of Jubilee. Well, that other person would buy the land, you'd have the money, but then 5 years later in the year of Jubilee, you'd get the land back free of charge. This was something God did so that the land would never be misallocated, or it would never be just belonging to one person or to one group of people. The land would be spread out in ownership. Okay, hopefully that made some sense to you. Now verse 47. If a foreigner residing among you becomes rich, and any of your fellow Israelites become poor and sell themselves to the foreigner. So first we were selling land, now we're selling ourselves in order to survive. And sell themselves to the foreigner or to a member of the foreigner's clan, they retain the right of redemption after they have sold themselves. And there's a couple ways they could be bought back, redeemed. First, one of their relatives may redeem them. An uncle or a cousin or any blood relative in their clan may redeem them. Or if they prosper, if the person who sold themselves, if they prosper, they may redeem themselves. They and their buyer are to count the time from the year they sold themselves up to the year of Jubilee. So maybe it's 5 years away, maybe it's 45 years away. The price for their release is to be based on the rate paid to a hired worker for that number of years. If many years remain, they must pay for their redemption a larger share of the price paid for them. If only a few years remain until the year of Jubilee, they are to compute that and pay for their redemption accordingly. They are to be treated as workers hired from year to year. You must see to it that those to whom they owe service do not rule over them ruthlessly. Even if someone is not redeemed in any of these ways, they and their children are to be released in the year of Jubilee. For the Israelites belong to me, God, as servants. They are my servants, whom I brought out of Egypt. I am the Lord your God. So that section there in Leviticus 25, it sums up what we're going to hear in Ruth later as the guardian redeemer law. It had to do with, well, we're going to hear about it in Ruth, buying land from a poor person who had to sell the land in order to survive, basically. Now, one more section, this one's shorter. It's from Deuteronomy chapter 25, verses 5 through 10. This also plays a part in Ruth, and this was known as the Levirate law. And this didn't have to do with buying land. It had to do with marriage with a widow in order to keep the husband's name alive, keep the family name going. Here's the law that God set up. If brothers are living together and one of them dies without a son, now you ask, what does that mean? Well, typically then brothers would live still in the father's household as long as their father was alive. And if they were married, they, their wife, their children, their whole family would still live in the father's household until the father died. So that's what it means when it says, if brothers are living together. And one of them dies without a son, his widow must not marry outside the family. Her husband's brother shall take her and marry her and fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law to her. The first son she bears shall carry on the name of the dead brother, so that his name will not be blotted out from Israel. Now, this could mean literal brother. If there were no literal brother available who was unmarried, then it could go to the nearest relative. And that's what we're going to see play out in Ruth later on. However, if a man does not want to marry his brother's wife, she shall go to the elders at the town gate, kind of the courthouse, and say, my husband's brother refuses to carry on his brother's name in Israel. He will not fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law to me. Then the elders of his town shall summon him and talk to him. If he persists in saying, I do not want to marry her, his brother's widow shall go up to him in the presence of the elders, take off one of his sandals, spit in his face, and say, this is what is done to the man who will not build up his brother's family line. In other words, this is really serious. Verse 10, that man's line shall be known in Israel as the family of the unsandaled. This is God's word. Keep these legal details in mind. They'll help us as you listen to the sermon later.